Remember, it's all the chronic disorders, the attention problems, social emotional issues, dysregulation, picky eating, digestive problems, reading problems, right? The list that I continually rattle off. There is a genetic element, and then there's the environmental factors, and that's what we're going to unravel.
Hello, and welcome to Talking Toddlers, where I share more than just tips and tricks on how to reduce tantrums or build your toddler's vocabulary. We're going to cover all of that, but here, our goal is to develop clarity, because in this modern world, it's truly overwhelming. This podcast is about empowering moms to know the difference between fact and fiction, to never give up, to tap into everyday activities so your child stays on track. He's not falling behind, he's thriving through your guidance. We know that true learning starts at home, so let's get started.
In this episode, I'm going to share a little bit of the science behind how we know what to do at home to build a healthy, pliable, adaptive, and ever-expanding neuropathway system. So when you don't want to read The Cat in the Hat for the 100th time today, you just smile and continue, because you know you can almost see the neurons firing and wiring in his beautiful, witty little brain. This episode's topic emerged because there's been some exciting science bubbling up, and as a new parent or a new grandparent, it's imperative that you gain at least a 30,000-foot view. So now, let me ask you this question. Have you heard of epigenetics? It's an emerging area of scientific research that shows how environmental influences, your toddler's daily experiences, actually affect the level of gene expression. In other words, we can turn gene expression up or down. Expression in this context means that it's turned into function, or actually begins to appear and impact a person's everyday life. And just because we have a genetic predisposition, in other words, it runs in the family, does not mean your child will develop XYZ, whatever that biological predisposition is. This means that the old idea that genes were set in stone has been disproven. And at the end of the day, it also means that not one of us, your baby, your toddler, you and me, are ever stuck. And the so-called debate, nature versus nurture, is no longer a debate. It's almost always both. So what we're born with, our biology or our genetic makeup, needs to be nurtured in order to develop or express itself. Let me give you some real-life examples. During development, early child development, the DNA that makes up our genes begins to accumulate these things called chemical marks. And it's those chemical marks that determine how much or how little a gene is expressed. This collection of chemical marks is known as epigenome. The prefix epi just means above. So it's above the genome. And genome, again, is our full genetic makeup. These chemical marks tell the genome what to do. And so the different experiences that you provide for your baby, your toddler, your preschooler, or children at any age, these experiences rearrange those chemical marks. This explains why genetically identical twins can exhibit very different behaviors, very different skills, have remarkably different health outcomes and lifetime achievement. It's not based on the genetic makeup. It's based on the experiences that then create these epigenetic or chemical marks that rest above the genes. So the genes your child inherits from you, the biological parents, provide information that will guide their development. Scientists explain it this way. The structural genome, all of the genetic material that we're born with and that we inherit from both sets of parents, can be thought of as the hardware of a computer. So think of your computer, and both the hardware in your computer and your genome, your biological makeup, determine the boundaries of what's possible. But neither one will work without an operating system. And this operating system tells the genome what to do. In our genome, that operating system is called the epigenome. So like the software in your computer, the epigenome determines which functions the genetic hardware, our gene pool, does and does not perform or express itself. It sounds a little gibberish, perhaps, but what I want you to be clear is that your baby and your toddler's everyday experiences with you or any other primary caretaker, right? Grandparents, sitters, siblings, the daily routines that you're creating, your social interactions, emotional responses, your reaction times, all of that engagement, those learning opportunities, changing his diapers, giving him a bath, taking him to the grocery store, hanging out at the park. They all rearrange the epigenetic marks that govern or direct gene expression. And these marks can change whether or not genes release certain information, and then they manifest or they express themselves in real time in a human's life. So let's think of some heavy hitters, some genetic or family history that you might be familiar with, such as cancer. Cancer can run in families. Cardiovascular disease, diabetes is assumed to be genetic. Autoimmune disorders and psychiatric illnesses, as well as autism. Let's look at some more subtle ones. Learning disabilities. I have always been taught and trained to understand that learning disabilities run in families. It's genetically linked, not a one-to-one correlation, but if you have members in your immediate family that have learning disabilities, then there's a higher risk of you or your children having them. Processing speed problems, attention deficit disorder, dyslexia, anxiety, all of these more subtle genetic, hereditary kinds of disorders or problems. However, today I want to bring to you a new study that was published just this past June in Nature Neuroscience, which is the world's leading multidisciplinary science journal. Dr. James Morton and his team report on a meta-analysis of 25 studies that could, they say, shift our understanding of the causes of autism. And a meta-analysis means that they look across numerous studies across countries and different research labs, and they're gathering the most credible information and to see if there's a continuity or a pattern. And I've shared with you in past episodes that my mission here has always been to prevent developmental issues, to stay ahead of the curve, right? To arm you parents and grandparents with the science background and the day-to-day strategies that help keep your most precious gifts on track, your babies, your toddlers, your preschoolers. So during the last 15 or so years, the scientific community at large has kind of pushed the premise that the main reason the numbers of cases with autism or developmental disabilities across the board, why these cases have skyrocketed, was due to our advances in diagnostic capabilities. And perhaps we've built a greater understanding or a better awareness of what autism looks like. And I just have to say, with all honesty, that us practitioners who were on the floor, playing, learning, perhaps in the classroom, part of the diagnostic teams, that's not how we felt. Yes, we all got better at evaluating and treating. Yes, I had to, because parents were calling the office every single day, and the numbers and the questions and the concerns continued to expand. So then the scientific community, or the policymakers at large, began to add the possibility of genetic factors contributing to autism and the numbers. And part of this is true. We had a clearer understanding through better technology as we were able to identify specific genes or gene patterns that could be contributing to this neurological deficit. Yes, that's part of the puzzle too. But remember, I'm talking about current numbers. Today, 1 in 36 kids are diagnosed on the autism spectrum. 1 out of 6 children are diagnosed with any number of developmental disabilities. So that's huge, especially if I compare it to, like I've shared before, when I began my practice, it was 1 in 1,000. When I was a child, it was 1 in 10,000. And today it's 1 in 36. So yes, we're better at diagnosing, and we do diagnose earlier. And our skills at treating are better. That's for sure. We all had to up our game. And yes, there is a genetic link, just like any other neurological problem or developmental issue. There is a genetic predisposition. However, that doesn't speak to all of the numbers. So now, what's finally happening is evidence is beginning to build around environmental factors that are also contributing to all of these disorders, not just autism, but to speech and language delay, to anxiety, to ADHD, to executive functioning issues, all of them. So please note that what I'm suggesting and what the science is suggesting, that it's not an either or. It's not genetics or environment. It's both. And what we say is that there's a biological predisposition or a genetic susceptibility, and then the environmental triggers. And it depends on how many environmental triggers a little baby or a little toddler has to deal with. It also depends on how big the biological predisposition or susceptibility is in utero and then at birth. So although the current research, or the ones that have the biggest megaphones, continue to push autism as a predominant genetic problem, a lot of Instagram people and YouTubers and even large institutions, they're all still saying, it's a genetic problem. And therefore, there's nothing we can do about it. But that, my dear friends, is looking a lot like BS. Remember, it's all the chronic disorders, the attention problems, social emotional issues, dysregulation, picky eating, digestive problems, reading problems, right? The list that I continually rattle off. There is a genetic element, and then there's the environmental factors, and that's what we're going to unravel. So before I go ahead and share the key takeaways of what this research is suggesting and how this shift and how the researchers are admitting that they can no longer ignore the external environment, let me step in here and just ask a big favor of you, my great listeners. If you find that you're gaining benefit, please consider writing a positive review, because it's very exciting to share this information. But it's hard to find my people just like yourself. And this is the primary way that any podcast is pushed out to other listeners that are interested in similar things. So parents and grandparents like yourself who are eager and trying to do right for their children. So there is a link in the description below that will help you navigate. Please realize the only way to write a review is to use your smartphone, and because that's how Apple Podcast works. So I really appreciate, just go down to the link, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll see on your phone, write a review. I really appreciate your feedback and support in building this community because it's very exciting how the shift is happening. So the key takeaways regarding this epigenetic work and this science behind it is that we can look at both positive and negative daily experiences, right? So the positive daily experiences, the learning opportunities that you set up, such as building a beautiful, responsive relationship, building attachment through positive engagement with your baby and your toddler, opportunities to move about in different environments, in home, outside, in the community, with extended families, to build and explore and create, to get messy, to laugh, giggle, listen, try and try again, and to contemplate and think. Yes, your 1, 2, and 3-year-old is contemplating. If you've ever watched a toddler try to put on his shoe for the first time and figure it out, to orient it, or when they're first interested in learning how to zip a jacket or unlatch a lock, they are persistent, they are patient, they are tenacious, and they're thinking and thinking and thinking and trying to figure it out. All of those wonderful experiences build an epigenetic profile of positivity, of engagement. But then we also have to look at what are the possible negative influences that are impacting and allowing the genes to express that we don't want to express. The environmental toxins, a stressful life, a stressful pregnancy. We've always known that there was a strong correlation between the mother's stress during pregnancy, especially that third trimester, and ADHD, that there was a strong correlation. Other negative influences could be being understimulated, and that means that the baby is kept in a car seat or in a carrier too many hours of the day, or placed in the bouncer, not enough tummy time, not enough opportunity to reach and grab and touch things, safe things in his or her immediate environment, right? Or once they start walking, do they have freedom and mobility inside and outside of the house, right? There's a lack of outside or change of scenery, that they're limited, that they need sunlight, nature, and trees and grass, walking barefoot, getting messy, getting dirty, all of these things that I've shared with you in the past. And then there's also the negative influencers with regard to processed foods, the lack of dense nutrients that we need to feed the body and the brain, to build this body and brain, each and every cell. And then there's dysregulated sleep patterns from the blue lights on our screens that affect all of us. Children, babies, adults, toddlers, teenagers, all of us are affected by that blue light. Chronic congestion, poor nasal drainage because of ultra-processed foods. And then your baby, your toddler, your school-age kid becomes an open mouth breather. And I have an episode on that. These environmental experiences, both the negative and the positive, leave a unique epigenetic signature on our genes, on that hardwire system. Now, this epigenetic signature, it can be temporary or permanent. You can repeat the negative or repeat the positive. Recent research shows that there may be ways to reverse certain negative changes and restore healthy functioning. But, as I always say here, the very best strategy, and this is what the research is suggesting, is to support a healthy relationship, responsive parenting, and build that social engagement from day one to reduce the stress in utero and after birth, to build healthy habits around eating, lots of opportunity to talk, which includes singing and reading and general communication and engagement, small, medium, and large events throughout your day, and to play. And by the way, helping us do chores around the house, which all toddlers love to do, laundry, dishes, grocery shopping, dusting, pulling weeds, taking out trash, things that I've shared with you in the past, these things that you and I've learned to dread, it's child's play. They love it. It's not work. They don't know the difference yet. They want to be with us and share everyday events, and that's how they learn. This is how we build a healthy, efficient, energized brain from the very beginning. Talking, eating, and playing. We take advantage of the so-called windows of opportunities, which I'll dive into at a later time, but for this purpose, it's just defined as stretches of time in which a young brain responds to certain types of input very naturally, and it builds those neural networks. So for example, the window of opportunity to build someone's vocabulary is from birth to 7 years of age. And then it seems to switch. Vocabulary is then acquired through most of their reading, or once they become a fluent reader at 7, 8, or 9 years of age, right? But the window of opportunity for the brain to acquire vocabulary in this three-dimensional world is between birth and 7. The window of opportunity for building a healthy emotional regulation or emotional control is typically from birth to 4 years of age. The window of opportunity for motor skill development, birth to 9 years of age, because that's from fine motor and gross motor. It's from little things like putting puzzles together to riding bicycles and climbing a tree and soccer and t-ball and dance and whatever else they do motorically, right? And fine motor, handwriting, painting. And then a window of opportunity for math and logic would be from birth to 5 years of age. And this doesn't mean math like you sit down and do math drills, right? It means higher order thinking, that they understand that they have 2 pieces of apples and they can share, or that they can predict what a character is going to do next, or if they can't find their shoes, where would be a logical place to look? Where was the last time you used them? Go look on the back porch. Those kinds of, it's heavy language processing, but it's also built around their motor, their fine and gross motor skills. And that's one of the reasons why crawling is an important developmental marker, because it helps wire the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, the upper motor neurons with your upper body, if you think about crawling, and your lower motor neurons, your lower body. And there's a sequencing pattern. But the windows of opportunity makes it easier and smoother, that you don't literally have to show them hand over hand each and every one of these things. And we can talk about in greater detail of what these windows of opportunities are and aren't. But the purpose here is that this is not the only time windows appear. There's another big developmental jump, especially in that frontal lobe, with higher order thinking and executive functioning and discernment, reducing impulsivity and all of that. And that's developed around 15, 16 years of age. And that is for a different conversation. But my point here is that these windows still require opportunities and engagement. Just because vocabulary is easier to acquire those first 4, 5, 6 years doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be stimulated. So real life experiences in real time with real humans, that's why human interaction is 1,000 times better than screen time. And the experiences in this 3D world will help drive the neural pathways, as well as build this epigenetic marker system and express the genes that we want and keep at bay the genes that we don't want. So a number of years ago, policymakers at large seemed to coin this phrase, and I swear I go to any state early development website and they use the term serve and return. It comes from tennis, of course, that you need to serve and return with your baby and your toddler and your children to build all of these networks, all of these developmental skills, that your baby will do something and then we respond to the baby. He serves, we return. And they're like, okay, let's try that again. He'll serve again and we return. And then through trial and error, we hit a ball back and forth, or we giggle, or we play peekaboo, or we push the ball, or we knock down the tower. All of this serve and return. And we're building up your baby, your toddler's abilities through this volley, right? But it needs engagement. It needs turn taking. We begin to hone these skills and the automaticity of it with a lot of practice. So serve and return requires the adults, primarily, especially in those first 3 years, and this is another conversation, but babies and toddlers really don't engage with other babies and toddlers until they're closer to that third birthday. So it requires the adults in your immediate life, in your baby's life, to respond in real time, positively and purposefully, with human connection, to provide some comfort and stability and grace. And through guidance and modeling and shaping, showing them how, to put their pants on and showing them how to turn the faucet, then things begin to interact. And that's when true learning takes place. The 4 key takeaways for you today. 1, nature versus nurture is no longer a debate. It's almost always both, and that's thanks to the study in epigenetics. Number 2, what is epigenetics? Epigenetics shows how your child's environment, his or her everyday experiences, can turn genes on or off, and how much of it will be expressed. So if you have a biological predisposition to a reading disability or autism or stuttering, based on their life experiences, they can turn that gene on or off. Keep it at bay. Number 3, we are never stuck. We are very pliable, malleable human beings. We're designed by our higher God to do that. However, it takes a lot more work to correct something when they're 7 or 10 or 12 than to set up the environment, set up his experiences as healthy and as rich and as true to nature as possible from birth. Those first 3 years, first 5 years. We're never stuck. Number 4, even if you feel like you've missed a certain window of opportunity, you haven't. Yes, it's easier to learn speech and language those first 3 years, but we can rectify matters if you feel like you're not on the right track. Start where your baby or your toddler is today. Look at your home environment. How can you upgrade the language base in it using everyday activities? Focus on my 3 pillars. Look at their eating skills. Where have they been developing and how can you improve it? Look at their talking or their social communication with you. Gestures, nonverbal communication, response time, as well as verbal talking and following directions and listening to stories and all of that. And then play. What does play mean? It means engagement. It means doing something, having fun, being silly. You, mom and dad, you, grandparents, babysitters, aunt, uncle, be present, be curious, be engageable. If you are curious at how these puzzles work or how this mud puddle can get bigger and bigger and how the dinosaur can get buried in the sand, if you're curious, then they're going to be responsive to that. We can activate genetic potential naturally. We can enhance the positivity and hold back the negative elements every day in your home. So if you want more ideas, you can go back to previous episodes looking at episode number 39, episode 35 and 36, where I talk about picky eaters, how to jumpstart talking. That was back in February 14th, I believe. And then the top 10 parenting essentials, that was from last year on July 26th. This is exciting. Thanks again for spending your precious time with me. I love sharing what I have learned through my practice, as well as continue to learn with what's coming out of the science world and how I question what makes sense to me, what's logical. The whole nature-nurture thing, it always made sense that we needed to nurture what we were born with. It's a journey and we're in it together. God bless and see you next week.